You had brought up something before the show about the CCP's interest in the Korean Peninsula, and as early as 2020, we saw our favorite Chinese state-run media, the Global Times, say that kimchi, a traditional Korean dish, was in fact has been part of Chinese heritage since ancient times. So, how many steps is it from there to taking over Korea?
So the kimchi, the great kimchi incident, that was actually part of something bigger. But I think,
No. I was joking, Josh. Are you serious?
No, I'm serious.
Okay.
Actually.
The kimchi thing was a big deal at the time.
Well, I know it was a big deal, but okay.
Was.
Now go ahead, blow our minds.
Yeah. So the kimchi story, right, where the CCP claimed that kimchi was, part of China and Korea just kind of adopted kimchi, right? That was actually part of a Chinese military information warfare operation.
What? No.
Let me readjust myself. Okay.
All right, go.
Yeah. Go.
I'm not even joking. It's called the Northeast Project. And so the CCP rewrote Korean history and claimed historical ownership over the entire Korean peninsula. The program they used for that, it's called the Northeast Project. And the narrative of kimchi being Chinese and not Korean was one of the many things they did where they claimed historical ownership, not just of like South Korea, but of North Korea as well. They claim ownership over the entire Korean peninsula.
So what is the point of doing that? I mean, it's not just historical revisionism. They just want to make themselves feel better, right?
And how does Kim Jong-un feel about this?
Well, it's the same thing they do in every other area, right? The CCP claims historical ownership over the South China Sea. They claim ownership over Taiwan. They claim historical ownership over Xinjiang and Tibet. It's the same narrative. And so the Korea thing gets a bit wild, so stick with me. They also had a war on K-dramas, right?
Oh, right.
I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a K-drama war. And this is the story of it is, basically when the CCP first started opening up culturally, they started letting in foreign movies and foreign entertainment. A lot of American movies didn't really resonate as much, but Korean entertainment did. And the reason it did was because China has a lot of shared values with Korea because they're, Confucian-influenced countries. South Korea, maintains a lot of the Confucian values that older Chinese people probably remember. And so when they started bringing in Korean dramas and Korean entertainment, it started revitalizing a lot of the values the CCP had destroyed, right? They had the whole anti-Confucius operations in China. And so as people started getting more interested in old values and old, cultural, old portrayals of culture, the CCP actually saw it as a threat to its power, which is why I remember you covered this, Chris. The CCP made like regulations on time travel, to go after the K-dramas. Because these things were making people reminiscent of the cultures the CCP destroyed. And so what the CCP is doing with Korea has been heavily like a culture war. They're trying to diminish Korean traditional culture, and they're trying to say that is Chinese culture, and they're trying to integrate Korea into China. When I was there, actually, crazy stuff. I had no idea the CCP had as much influence in Korea as it does in South Korea. I went there because I found basically the CCP had threatened one of the Korean state-run theaters, right? It's called KBS. Kind of like we have PBS, public broadcasting. KBS is Korean public broadcasting. They have a media, and they also have one of the biggest theaters in Korea. Shenyun Performing Arts, as you know, an American, New York-based performing arts company that shows all the culture the CCP tried to destroy. They were supposed to perform at KBS. The CCP threatened KBS. And this was public. It was actually brought out in the court documents. They were threatening Korea with just massive trade sanctions. Like, huge trade damage if they allowed Shen Yun to perform in Korea. And so the theater actually canceled the performance by Shen Yun to the point where it was literally right before the show. And so people showed up for the thing they paid to go watch, and they couldn't go to the theater because they canceled the show. So I went there to investigate, what is the CCP's influence in Korea? You actually have right now, the two political parties in Korea is this. The left wing, if you want to even call it that, in Korea, they're pro-North Korea and they're pro-CCP. They're anti-America. The left-wing politics in Korea, in South Korea, they're pro-North Korea. It's crazy as that sounds.
I know that sounds crazy, but we've had several guests on who have talked about that. So
yeah, there were even some restrictions put on media for how they could refer to Kim Jong-un. Like they couldn't use certain derogatory terms like dictator in newspapers, regardless of who owned the newspaper.
Yeah, and so what's happening in South Korea is the CCP is heavily using culture war, business, and subversion to basically take it over. In my opinion, they're on the brink of basically within a generation. I think South Korea will be part of China within a generation.
Do you mean actual territory or just under their sphere of influence?
More like a puppet state, I think, because what they're using is the United Front. In Korea, the success of the United Front in South Korea is the furthest along I have ever witnessed. South Korea is further along on being subverted through the United Front than anywhere I have ever seen. And the way it works is this: in the U.S. it's not as advanced. But what they try to do is they try to capture the civil society. And so the thinking of the CCP is what constitutes power? What is it that determines who rules a country? Well, you have the government, right? And then you have the civil society. And so what the United Front aims to do is change the allegiance of the civil society. And so they buy off the businesses, they buy off the entertainment, they buy off the education system. And once you control the information, once you control the news, once you control the culture, once you control the business, you control the country. And so the CCP, through the Northeast Project, again, the whole kimchi thing, through the Northeast Project, they've been doing that. And you have it so that Korean businessmen, they cannot afford to not be pro-CCP. They can't do business. If you're in entertainment, you can't afford to not be pro-CCP, or nothing you make is going to be seen, in China, which is one of the big markets they have. Their entire infrastructure is tied in with the CCP, and all the leaders, the influencers who are part of that, they're captured by it to the point where the CCP threatens them. I mean, I'll tell you something crazy. One of the individuals I talked to, I talked to government officials, I talked to people there, they were terrified of the CCP. We had one individual who said that there was a government official in Korea, and this was off record, but I can talk about it, right? I can't name the guy. He had actually come out to support Falun Gong, right? He was sympathetic. The CCP called him to China for a meeting. They turned off the lights in the room and they physically beat him. They beat him up.
Wow.
A South Korean government official. And they do that. They blackmail them, they bribe them, they get them involved in honey traps. And if you understand Korean culture, any kind of scandal will destroy you in that country. The people I talked to, every one of them, they were terrified, almost across the board, terrified of the CCP. And so South Korea is being subverted. And in relation to what you're talking about with Taiwan, look, the big name going around is TSMC, right? Chinese, Taiwanese semiconductors. What's the other big semiconductor manufacturer? Well, it's right, Samsung, right? And so, Korea is important in this, and the CCP is trying to get control of Korea.